Welcome the ladies and the gentle peasants to a very long overdue video on a world of the Final Fantasy, an offshoot of the Final Fantasy game that was in fact a very over the good. I can't keep it up anymore. I was going to do the entire video in Tama's language. This is a video I have wanted to do for ages because it is criminal that there aren't more WoFF videos on this channel. It was such a good game, it was such a solid high quality title, the storyline was fantastic, the scripting was hilarious, the quests were fun, the art style, oh man, the way it flipped up between the anime art style and the regular art style. The only thing I could critique really from World of Final Fantasy is possibly its combat system. While I thought it was all in all very good, there were certainly parts I could critique, certain parts that I felt could have been improved, but enough of that. This is not a review video. Oh no. This is something much more doperino. Because while I was looking at World of Final Fantasy on Metacritic, which all in all it gets a very good score, when I looked at the negative scores, the people who gave it 0, there was one thing they all had in common, and I think it's totally unfair, I think it's totally false, that World of Final Fantasy is a story for children. It's a children's game, the story is simple, basic, 2D, unevolved, unfleshed out, you get what I'm saying guys, naming of the above, and I've heard the same thing for Kingdom Hearts. That Kingdom Hearts is a simple game for simple-minded children, and only a 6-year-old could be interested. Well, of course, we know that's not true. Kingdom Hearts is blowing my mind to smithereens. It has a very mature storyline, it has a very complex lore, and while it does mix up the light with the dark, the fluff and the cheese with the soul-destroying heartbreak, I'm going to be strong guys. World of Final Fantasy is absolutely no different. In fact, I would say it's just as complex, if not more complex. And in terms of Final Fantasy games, I would say that WoFF has one of the most fleshed out world lores, because as I've gone on to research this video, as I've pulled back the layers of kawaii and chibbiness, I cannot believe just how deep this story was. I knew it was deep, but not even I knew it was this deep, so we are going to go on a fully fledged lore dive. World of Final Fantasy fans unite, get your flip-flops ready, put a fish on your head, and see how far you can make it through this video before you are totally lost and confused. I'll be shocked if you make it to the end. And let's go! The multiverse. I'm going to start here because explaining the universal law of World of Final Fantasy is going to be really important. And this does include the multiverse. Now, the multiverse is a term, it gets thrown around in Final Fantasy a lot. I get asked this all the time. Pez, do you believe that all Final Fantasy games are connected? And it's simply true that the answer is yes. Yes, they are. We have seen strong enough evidence to say that there are certain Final Fantasy titles that share the same universe, but that they all share the same multiverse, so many universes within a multiverse. And this has been supported by Dissidia, it's been supported by Final Fantasy XIV, and it's also been supported by World of Final Fantasy. And this was what really solidified for me that the multiverse is a thing, when Square Enix have gone to such great lengths to think of elaborate but canonical ways that all of Final Fantasy games can be linked in a multiverse. They're not doing it for no reason. So you've got universes, multiverses, and we've also got something called an extraverse. But I'm going to get onto that later. But within World of Final Fantasy, it is a universe, and within this universe there are multiple worlds called A-worlds. One of these worlds is called Grimoire, where we frolic with Lan and Rain, and there's mirages, and we try to catch them all, and everyone's got a misshapen head. Now, the person who created these worlds is Enna Kros, and she might just be one of the most powerful Final Fantasy characters in the franchise. Now, I think most people picked up that she was the god of this universe, but I think it was lost on a lot of people exactly what she is. The interesting thing about Ena Krow is that she's exactly the same as Brandalus in terms of how she is created. They're more or less the same thing, which is a twisted kind of irony. I think we also picked up that Ena Krow was somehow an Alexander. But she wasn't the only one, she was an Alexander among Alexanders, that's why she was talking to one. And it's exactly the same as Brandalus, he's a Bahamut among Bahamuts, 14 in fact. And the reason for this was explained to us when Alwyn and Quistis were talking to Bahamut. Explained to us that the way a herald is made, one of these gods, is by 3 things: a human, an Esper, and a god from the extraverse. Now, admittedly, that was explaining how the X9 Knights were made, so Ena Krow might not be a god from the extraverse, but she still is part of a human and also part of an Esper. The Esper she was made from was Alexander, and that's why there was that scene when she was sat on the big bridge, the one that Ico was a guardian of, and Ena Krow was speaking to the other Alexander, and they was reminiscing about how they once competed for position of God and how they created a right mess and they destroyed a lot of stuff. But then she went on to say some other weird stuff that only until recently I couldn't work out. She started talking about other Esper. She spoke about an Eden of Balaam, a Midgasoma of Midgardian Oma, a Ragnarok Lute, and loads of other fancy wording that I couldn't understand. She was actually talking about other Esper gods, and this gets really complicated because some have fused with humans, some have guardians, some have familiars. Familiars being the thing that Tama and Seraphi are, but I'm gonna start with Alexander Big Bitch. I mean Big Bridge. That was the other Alexander Ena Krow was talking about, and his guardian is Ico. We have Alexander Ena Krow, whose familiar is Tama. Her guardians are technically Lan and Rain, thinking about it, and also the human she fused with was called Roxanne. It was the fusing of their two souls that made the super powerful god that she is now, and you might have noticed that Ena Krow is a jumble up of the name Roxanne, and what's even more interesting about that, and what's clever about it, is Alexander the Great had a wife called Roxanne, and that's why she's called Ena Krow. It's a clever little link between Alexander the Great, Alexander the Esper, and Ena Krow herself being Alexander. Another Esper is Bahamut, and there are 14 of these in total. The main one is Brandalus, he is the Bahamut king. There is also the Diablos, the one that Alwyn speaks to, and Diablos joins up to try to kill this guy because he wants to be the Bahamut king. And the thing with the different Espers is they have different Esper worlds as well, and Brandalus should not be part of this world. He's actually from another universe and shouldn't be here, but Alwyn explains that a tear in the fabric of the universe was created and that's how they got through, and that tear is the Ultima Gate. But we'll get more into that later. Long story short, Brandalus, like a dick, he comes through, he decides he wants to try to conquer everything, but he would have no power. This was the other interesting thing, because this is an Alexander world, he would be totally powerless, but this is where it gets really trippy, what Brandalus did and what can be done in this universe, and there are a few characters that have done this. The girl who forgot her name was another one. Brandalus creates a pocket universe within that universe. So basically, it's a universe within a universe that he can go in, and then his laws apply. The laws of his universe apply. And that's why Alwyn and Rain and Lan were saying it's more or less impossible to beat him. And he creates his pocket universe around the Ultima Gate so that he can then transform the Ultima Gate into a portal, and that's what floods the Cogna through. Cogna being the monsters that we fight in Grimoire that aren't from Grimoire. So Cogna are different to Mirages. Mirages are native to the world and we collect those. Are you lost yet? Are you still following? The other Esper gods we know of is an Eden of Balaam, which Ena Krow mentioned. All we know is that its guardians are Quistis and Squall. The Lute of Ragnarok, which is guarded by Cornelia. The whole kingdom of Cornelia and Princess Sarah guard that, and also now Warrior of Light. And then we have the Midgardian Oma, which we know sleeps beneath Figaro Castle under the ever-watchful, sexy, suave eye of Edgar Figaro. He was such a cool character in WoFF, and voiced by none other than Ray Chase.
You know, there's certainly no way for us to treat a lady. Or as I frequently say, the churl never gets the girl.
Moving on quickly, there are two more Espers, Valigamando Pelennor and Zone Seeker Saguareds. Now you might notice these, those are the ones that Rain and Lan's parents turned into. So they did fuse with Luce and Rorik, their parents, but they were also fused to other humans before that. It was a strange detail when they told us that Saguareds had been fused with a human called Epina, and Pelennor had been fused with a human called Pwyll. So many random crazy details. And then finally, the other Esper we do know of is Yawain, or Iwan. Yawain? Yawain? Or is it just Wayne? Alright, screw it, I'm going with Iwain. They was fused with the Esper Carbuncle, and this was the character who tricked Lan and Rain into believing that she was in fact Alwyn, their sister, and Carbuncle did that because Carbuncle was working with Brandalus and they wanted to open the Ultima Gate. This might have been the first time we've ever seen Carbuncle as a villain, and just an interesting detail there, it wasn't Yawain who was controlling Carbuncle, it was vice versa. It does specifically say Carbuncle was the one in control. So yeah, damn, Esper gods. And there is one other we know about. So we only know about 3 Esper kingdoms, or confirmed Esper kingdoms. The Alexander one, the Bahamut one, but it was also mentioned that there was a Diablos one. Diablos, he was a king of his own Esper world, but supposedly he lost control of his kingdom and it slipped away into darkness. Now, it went into a story of how that happened, and supposedly it was because of an Alexander. And it was Alexander Big Bridge. He was once fused with a human called Aris. So this young man Aris was what caused it to happen. He brought down this whole Diablos kingdom, and I'll just say there's really room for a prequel story here. World of Final Fantasy 2. Make it happen. But Diablos, after he loses his kingdom, he goes on a reign of terror using his very specific powers over fantasy to invade people's dreams, have a taste of their darkest nightmares, and continue to exist in this new kind of interdimensional darkness area. But the main thing with Diablos, and what I'm going to move on to next, is Diablos had very specific powers just called powers over fantasy. And somebody else got a hold of a Diablos' power, and that person was none other, are you ready for it? The girl who forgot her name. Damn, I knew there was something ominous about her. Not only did she get Diablos' powers over fantasy, but when she came from the extraverse, that's the thing, she's another god from the, or kind of implied god from the extraverse. She also brought with her this clock, and supposedly when she bought this clock, that gave her the powers of time, and then that fused with the power of fantasy to who she is now, the girl who forgot her name, who can twist, manipulate time, reset it completely, and she goes on to befriend Ena Krow. But that little detail there I just said, that she came from the extraverse. The extraverse is something that no other Final Fantasies have really explored, but World of Final Fantasy did. The extraverse being things outside of the Final Fantasy multiverse, literally other franchises, and that's exactly where the girl who forgot her name comes from. I'm just going to call her T-Girl for short. She comes from a game called Sigma Harmonics, and she is the character Christy, a guardian of time outside of the A worlds, outside of Enna Krow's worlds, outside of the Final Fantasy worlds, and there were 2 other franchises that it did this with. So we had the Sigma, we also had Xenogears, and we had Kingdom Hearts. And yep, that's how Sora was a champion. Do you think they just threw him in there without thought? Just throw him in there as fan service? No, they actually went into some logical, canonical reasoning as to how he could be there. And it's this idea of the extraverse. Kingdom Hearts is part of it. Some might say it's pretty convoluted, but I think it's pretty cool. And I'm just gonna say, a lot of people, or some people do say Kingdom Hearts games are convoluted, or something like this is convoluted. I despise the word convoluted. Despise it. I think reviewers and people just use it to try to make themselves feel better for their own lack of understanding. I failed to understand it, so I'm going to blame the game for it. The thing is, with all of this lore and world of Final Fantasy, it's really logically laid out. It wasn't difficult for me at all to get all this information. It was clearly there in the data logs, and that's the balance I like with Final Fantasy, is that if you want to keep it, on a very easy to understand level, not everyone likes to go into crazy out there lore like this and have their mind exploded, but they got enough flavour of it in all the uplifted happiness that was the original game. But if you did want to go into a seriously in-depth lore dive, it was all there, just waiting to pummel your brain. But now I've mentioned Sora, and I've mentioned the champions. There was quite a fleshed out and interesting explanation as to why they're in this world, and how they've all been plucked from the multiverse and the extraverse, and it all comes down to a crystal. At the centre of Ena Krow's world lies a crystal, and Ena Krow had the power to take glimpses into worlds outside of her own dominion. And what she did when her world came under attack from the X9 Knights is she wanted to cherry pick the elements she liked from other universes, aka the other universe's strongest champions, so that she can then recreate them into her own world for its defense. Now, the way she creates them, it is brilliant madness that I like. So the crystal supposedly has the power to take, quote, flights of fancy to distant worlds that have no logical connection to its own. Figments of this crystal go out into the universe and extraverse in search of souls with the potential to protect Ena Krow's worlds from the likes of the X9 Knights and the Cogna. When these crystals then return with worthy candidates, she then shapes these souls, these crystal figments, into crystal tubes, which become a descendable, self-sufficient system of antibodies that activates when her universe is threatened from outsiders. Oh my goodness. But going back to the T-Girl, Sigma Harmonix Christi. She wasn't one of these people that Ena Krow pulled over. She slipped through one of these tears in the fabric of reality. She came with her clock, she befriended Ena Krow. But she doesn't answer to Ena Krow, because the T-Girl does exactly the same thing that Brandless done. She has created a pocket universe within Grimoire. So that little area where we go through the door and she's there just drinking tea in that really creepy area. I will admit, guys, she kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. But she is super powerful. In fact, the game states she's just as powerful as Ena Krow. But Girl Who Forgot Her Name gives her allegiance to Ena Krow regardless. And that is why she granted Tama her powers, Ena Krow's familiar. And also why she helped Rain and Lan, completely reversing times or sending them back in time or freezing time to help them on their adventure. And that's why, you know, it would happen in a really weird way, where the boss would think that they were about to fight someone else, like Gilgamesh for example, and then Rain and Lan would just come in. But the boss would be like, what the hell, why am I fighting you? Or in Gilgamesh's case, he didn't even notice he was fighting someone different.
Second of all, Gilgamesh, has he even noticed that he's fighting against us now?
I don't think so.
Poor Celeste. She's surrounded by idiots on all sides.
Barts! I've waited this moment 1,000 years. Oh, this game was so hilarious at the time. Honestly, I could say the questing, those side questings I was in stitches of laughter at times. So that's what the Girl Who Forgot Her Name could do. But then we go on to Tama, who got gifted this power. And this is where I'm going to go now onto the main story. I've explained the universe and how it works. Tama, quote, maintains an extremely high number of threshold and commands a large repertory of talents. However, depending on the world she visits, she must limit her talents to a smaller subset of talents. For example, in Grimoire, Tama can help Lan and Rain out by negating their deaths or failures. So that's how, if we got our asses KO'd, Tama could undo it. She can also control space. That's how the gate travel, when we fast travel in the world. She is required to pay for these actions in lives/souls, but all the same her powers rival that of gods. So a lot of detail there, that Tama, she isn't just powerful within the Grimoire universe, because she has the Girl Who Forgot Her Name's powers, just like the Girl Who Forgot Her Name, she has powers in other universes and the extraverse. And if Tama was to go into there, she would have different powers. So that was mad to read that even how powerful Tama was in Grimoire, it was just a smaller subset of her overall powers. It seems like World of Final Fantasy is hellbent on making the absolutely cutest characters the most powerful. Between Tama, the T-Girl and Ena Krow, these three might be the most powerful in the universe. I'm talking they could even kick X-Death's ass powerful. But as for the lives things, the person who accepts those lives is the Girl Who Forgot Her Name. She's the one who takes those off of Tama as a form of payment for the power she has given to Tama. And this was hugely important in the story. I'm going to try to explain the story really quickly, because this video is already very long. Rain and Lan, they are descendants of a very unique line who have very unique powers called Mirage Hunters, and these are the Farners. And because of their powers to control mirages and build a mirage army, they're more or less like kings and queens. But Lan and Rain, they grow up quite selfish, naive, and because their parents, they have a lot of pressure and responsibility on their shoulders, and these kids try to help out, and what they end up doing is accidentally opening the ultimate gate. Now Alwyn tried to stop them doing it, but Lan overexerted his powers and imprisoned Alwyn to stop her from interfering in these two kids trying to help their parents. And this was another side I liked about WoFF, because it actually made Rain and Lan the villains of the story. They were responsible for all of the bad happening. They were responsible for what happened to their parents, for Brandless to getting through, because this is what caused the tear in the fabric of time. Ena Krow tries to stabilise the situation. She brings forward the Final Fantasy characters from the other universe to defend against what has got in, and that's the Cogner, that's Brandless, and the other X9 Knights. She then sends Rain and Lan off to Ninewood Hills, which is kind of another fake interdimensional rift or pocket universe. She creates one solely for them to keep those two kids there until they are ready to return. And that's what made the sad ending all the sadder, because after Lan sacrifices himself to beat Brandless, and that's when Rain says, I'm ready to go back to my Ninewood Hills, which is a totally fake area with no people, where more or less it's saying I'm ready to go back into the zombie state that they were in. That's all the feels you're getting out of me for this video. But when they're ready, Ena Krow comes back, tells them about it, bring them back to Grimoire to fix everything. And this is where things like the Crimson Prophecy and the Azure Prophecy, and these were two prophecies. One was to get keys. The Crimson one was to get keys and that they would mount the crystal power and get the power of gods. That's seen as the fake prophecy. And there were those crazy lightning returns heretics who believed that one. And then there was the Azure prophecy, or Azure, which is kind of contradictory, which says it isn't keys, it's sigils. And this is one where one will bring about ruin, the other one will bring about salvation. Yada yada. And that was the true prophecy because it was the first summoner wrote that prophecy. And there's a whole lot of crazy lore about summoners and giants, and this is where Alwyn comes in because she's a summoner, but specifically a giant summoner and one of the last of her kind. And their powers are not native to Grimoire, and they actually give that power to certain Lillekins, the small midget chibi people in Grimoire, so that they can continue the line of summoners, because Alwyn's the last one, and that's where Yuna comes into it, Rydia comes into it, so on and so forth. But the timeline between the Ultimate Gate first being opened and then Rain and Lan stupidly opening it again, good god, the timeline between that is in fact hundreds of years. And so Alwyn, who is a physical age of 17, she's actually much older than that because he's been imprisoned for hundreds of years. Yeah, you can kind of understand why she was so pissed. But the twins, they go on to open the Ultimate Gate again, and admittedly in the first story they kind of redeem themselves in Lan's sacrifice, but that's when we had the really trippy scene, and this was the section of the game I really liked, because I'm a fan of Fabula Nova Crystallis and alternate timelines and realities. I kind of thrive on this sort of stuff. Rain gets asked if she can accept this fate. Brandless has been stopped and the world is safe. Can she accept it? To which she says no, she wants her brother back. And what she didn't realise is the person who was asking her was Tama. She didn't recognise older Tama Homehei. But she says yes, and that's why Tama resets the timeline, restarts it again, but to do that Tama has to sacrifice all of her lives. But this sacrifice is what saves the day, because it goes back to before the Ultimate Gate opened the second time, and Rain has full memories whereas Lan didn't, and this was when it went real trippy dippy doodah days, because it turns out that the entire time Tama never existed and it was Seraphi who was on the mission with us. Well, actually Tama did exist because Seraphi does say she once knew a Tama Homehei, but that was in the past. But then going forward, Rain knows who Suguares is, he knows who Pelennor is, that it's really their parents and that they won't be tricked by the carbuncle Ywain the second time. Tricked by being dressed up as Alwyn, their sister. And this is the other detail I'll quickly explain. Alwyn isn't really their sister, although she's referred to and seen as their sister. This is another thing that confused a lot of people. Alwyn is actually from a summoner line. She's kind of the bridge between the Lillekins of Grimoire and what once the giants, because giants are now extinct in this universe. And when Alwyn and Quistis are stood there and they're looking at the Crystal Tower, this was once Rain and Lan's kingdom. It was implied that this was 100 years ago. So yeah, I guess Alwyn's 117 years old, but she is one of the descendants of one of the first summoners in Grimoire and the last giant summoner. But she was brought up by the Farners. They kind of adopted her. That's why there's this whole thing about sister. It's an adopted sister. But now with full knowledge of the X9 Knights' plan, Brandelis' plan, who their parents are, what the Ultimate Gates are, they save the day. The Final Fantasy characters come in, the summoners come in, they help close the gate, and then there's that really dramatic ending where to get Brandelis actually through the gate, Rain and Lan have to sort of pluck his fingers away to go, and they go into the gate with him, and they kind of want that as their fate because of how much wrong they've done. And the Tama is the life is the back at this point as Tama Homehei. And the reason that was able to be done was because yes, Tama did indeed sacrifice all of her lives so that the T-girl would reset time. But then they find out a little cheeky clause where they find out that Tama is from a species known as QB, and that if they went and they took another QB's life, they could give them to Tama. Luckily, unfortunately, there is a QB who is a bit of an evil dick called the Black Fox, stationed in Saronia, so they go off, they get it, they claim its lives, and they give them back to Tama. That's how Tama returned. And then even at the end of the game, because they wanted to make WoFF the happiest, cheeriest game ever made, with the happy World of Final Fantasy dance ending. I love this ending. come at me. Please don't judge me. I love that ending. I have never smiled so hard, but they wanted a full reunion. The way they went about achieving it was in a secret ending when Ena Krow goes up to Alwyn and Tama and says, here's a reward for you. And what she actually did was she brought Rain and Lan back as mirages. Mirages. The things that they were capturing, she brought them back as one of those. So I think that it was implied that they had lost their powers of mirage hunters. So that way they wouldn't be able to cause any more trouble, they wouldn't cause any more danger, they wouldn't have the burden of being mirage hunters, and indeed at this point the world no longer needs them. Now I have seen it said that was a cop-out, but I don't care because it brought about the happy world of Final Fantasy dance ending. Oh god, look at Cloud. Look at him smiling. I have waited 20 years to see Cloud smile. Oh, the dancing. Good god. What an ending to a game. And on that note, I think I've just about explained everything I can about World of Final Fantasy. There's a lot more smaller intricate details I won't go into, but that's more or less the bulk of it. Hopefully I've not missed anything out. So yeah, a really deep, well fleshed out, well thought through lore that was pretty gritty at times, pretty far-fetched, pretty hard to understand and wrap your head around, that when I see Metacritic scores of this is a child's story, I have to think, you're a bit of a twat. Yes, you can say that they are kind of kiddish in the sense that they're cutesy. Okay, I can get that. I still think that's pretty lame. Why can't I, as a 24-year-old man, enjoy a bit of squee? Why can't I? Is it so wrong? But in terms of story, to call them simplistic and childish, you couldn't be further from the truth. Love this game, really love the cutscenes, really love the anime, love the comedy, the scripting, the puns. Oh, the puns were through the roof. Some of the funnest questing I've ever done, and all round just a really enjoyable experience. The Undead Princess, Troy Baker Ribbits.
Ribbit, ribbit.
What's with this toad?
Shameless breaking of the fourth wall, and all round just a hilarious game. Oh god, there is one detail I forgot. Because Rain and Lan opened the Summoner Gate, the Ultimate Gate, sorry, and they were pretty much the villains and the servants of the Demon Dyads, which is Rain and Lan's summons, because we found out that they'd previously worked with all these summons, like Bahamut and Odin. They'd worked with all of these. They went about the world wreaking havoc, and that's how they got their name of Demon Dyad. It was a name that was created to invoke fear, and that Mirage Hunters were no longer to be trusted. But there it is, guys, the world of Final Fantasy lore dive. Let me know in the comment section, what do you think about this? Are there any other details that I've even missed off on this video? Anyone who has made it to this part of the video, you are well and truly a story junkie, and I salute you. This game got so badly overshadowed by Final Fantasy 15. So overshadowed, nearly forgotten about, and it's a real shame. It needs more love, and a prequel, and or sequel. But there it is. Until the next video, the Kupo!